Emmerdale's Dylan Penders, Fred Kettle, knows exactly what the consequences of crossing Celia Daniels, Jay Griffiths, and Ray Walters, Joe Absalom, are. He's currently lying in hospital badly injured after Ray deliberately ran him over. This ghastly incident was live-streamed to a horrified Marlon Mark Charnock, Rona, Zoe Henry, and April Amelia Flanagan, who knew that it was a warning to them that they were all under Celia's control. April had finally admitted to Marlon that she'd been coerced into dealing drugs by Ray, but any chance of escaping their clutches at this point were thwarted by Ray, and the family knew they were trapped. April thought she had no option but to keep working for Ray until her debt to him was paid off, while Marlon alarmed Rona by beginning to think up ways he could pay the debt off himself. April also believes that she killed Callum, a vile man who'd paid to have sex with her. She hit him over the head with a heavy object and thought he was dead, something that Ray later confirmed. He knows that Callum is alive and well, but it helps to keep April under control if she believes she's a murderer because she won't want the police involved. In upcoming episodes, the family pin their hopes on Dylan. They hope that when he wakes up from a coma, he'll be able to tell the police everything he knows, and Celia and Ray will be arrested. April is more realistic about the way things would work out and knows that Dylan's life would be at risk if he spoke to the police, so she desperately begs him to keep quiet. Ray's hand tightens on the cup. He swallows, sets the tea down like a man setting down a weapon. The door opens and two officers step in, their radios pale at their hips, DS Carter unmistakable in the lead. Carter's face is a map of lines that say he has spent years drawing the same circle and hoping the answer will land inside. He is the kind of copper who knows how to make the room feel smaller, simply by standing at the threshold and choosing not to move. "Mr. Walters," Carter says, voice even. "Can we sit?" Ray gestures toward the battered sofa, as if welcoming them into the fold of his guilt. Celia, suddenly in the doorway, is silk and steel. She directs a cool smile at the officers the way you might direct a smile at a dog, kind but always in control. "Tea," she offers reflexively. "No, thank you," Carter says. He places a file on the coffee table and clicks the clasps closed with an economy that makes Ray's throat clench. "How is he?" Ray asks before there's even a chance to be anxious. "He means Dylan." Carter looks at him without indulgence. "He's stable," he says. "Conscious." Ray's world tilts. He cannot form the question. He cannot say the names that float like dead birds above the farmhouse. Celia. The farm. The workers. The debt. Bear Wolf. The things that are only whispered in corners now because grown women with milk on their hands are suddenly brittle with fear. Was he able to? Did he remember? Celia asks, leaning just enough into the conversation to make sure the silence answers for her. Her fingers are interlaced, thumb over thumb, a crucible of calm. Ray's mouth forms a hope he hasn't permitted himself to name. Carter's jaw tightens. He knows how to use silences as instruments. "We spoke to him," he says. "At length." There's a slow intake of breath from the room that sounds like the whole valley inhaling. "He said he couldn't remember." Ray says quickly, a bedside prayer. He's been through trauma. It's why his memory. The words tumble into themselves. Carter tilts his head, the motion of a man who is about to fold the world out of one's hands and show you the seams. "He told us he didn't want to talk at first," he says. "Said he was frightened. Said he was ashamed. Said he didn't want to cause trouble." He pauses, and Ray feels every syllable as a blow. "We tested him. We approached it a different way." "Different how?" Ray thinks, but he doesn't ask. The silence grows teeth. Celia's smile is small and precise. "So," she says. Ray could feel the currency of the single syllable. "We asked him about the farm, about the men who worked there," Carter says. He doesn't look at Celia. He's learned not to. He pulls a photograph from the file and slides it toward Ray. It's one of those grainy images from a mobile phone. Dylan in hospital clothes, gaunt, with a bruise still shadowing his cheek. Behind him, slightly out of focus, is a face Ray knows well. The face he has tried to forget seeing in the reflection when he washes his hands at night. Bear Wolf. Dylan's hand is raised, fingers trembling, as if he had been caught mid-motion of telling. "He told us things," Carter says. "He told us about patterns. About how people were moved, about payments, methods. He told us about threats and debts, and how people were made to stay. He named you, Mr. Walters." The words land and the room tilts. Ray's fingers whiten on the arm of the sofa. Celia's expression is the single, perfect piece of ice. "No," she says, soft. "He can't, he wouldn't." "He did," Carter says. "It's in the statement." Ray could have laughed then. Maybe it's the theater of it, the plosive certainty of the statement, the weight of the pen that finally signed his life to paper. Instead, he reached for the file as if to tear it up, but his hands are foolish with the wrong kind of courage. He opens the pages and reads his name in the flat, bureaucratic ink of a police report. Here's the paper as if it were a verdict. The words mean nothing and everything at once. They are a ledger against him. Celia's face is unreadable. For a second, Ray thinks of the 1,000 small transactions of cruelty she's supervised. The count of lights left on in disused sheds, the names whispered into ledgers, the way she sold fear like painted fruit. She used them like currencies. She still does. Are you going to arrest us? Ray asks, voice hoarse. Carter's eyes narrow slightly. We're investigating, he says. We'll be in touch. They leave the file on the table open like a book of names and move toward the door. Behind them, the farmhouse hums with the sound of a life that is suddenly measured in footfalls and footsteps. Ray watches them go, every muscle braced as if he might run after them and explain himself into safety. Once the door clicks shut, the house fills with a silence as thick as wool. For the first time since Dylan's live stream, Ray feels sweat bead under his collar, not because he's planning, but because he knows the law can speak louder than the farm ever could. Not because he's repentant. Because he is frightened of the competence of other people. Outside, Marlon sits on the low stone wall of the Rovers, elbows on knees, eyes empty. Rona paces the yard like a caged thing. April clings to the warmth of a blanket around her shoulders, although the rain has stopped and the air is clear and unkind. They have each been waiting since dawn with a hope that had started high and fragile and had been smothered into something smaller, an ember of possible justice. When the police car rolls in, it is as simple as a small animal on a leash. It stops, and D.S. Carter steps out of the driver's seat with his partner. For a moment, longer than it should be, Marlon thinks this will be it, a face-to-face, a confession, a light pouring down on secrets. Rona braces for every possibility, the mother in her already calculating protective chains. April feels the old habit of shrinking. Her bones are full of the sunlight she has been denied and the lies she thinks she must maintain. Carter moves toward them slowly. The economy of his gait a promise, nothing will move too fast or too slow. When he addresses them, his voice is tempered. We've spoken to Dylan, he says. He's named people involved in trafficking and coercion. He's given us details we didn't have before. We've got people coming in for questioning. Marlon's chest surges, Rona's jaw clamps. April's fingers curl into the blanket like a child clutching a talisman. Who? Rona asks, and it comes out as more command than question. Carter catches their faces in turn. His statement points to people connected with the farm. He's given us a list of names. We're following up, and we'll be talking to everyone who may have been involved. Marlon's first thought is of Bear Wolf, of the boy with the haunted eyes working under lights like a man too young for the world he had been forced to inhabit. The second thought is of Callum, the man who staggered away from a scuffle only to be in Ray's ledger of manipulations, the man April had hit and left and believed dead. April's breath catches. If any of this is true, if the police walk with momentum and purpose, then the myths Ray had built around them could crack. They didn't. Dylan never said anything specific about April, Rona says. Her voice trembles like someone balancing a glass on a plate. He didn't put her name down. Carter looks at her in a way that makes Rona want to put her arms around April and refuse to let the world outside breath. He did not specifically name her, Carter says. He implied that there were people coerced into doing things. He gave us methods and payments, he described places. If there's evidence to corroborate, we'll proceed. Marlon's eyes narrow. So they could arrest them? We have to corroborate, Carter says. Statements help, but we need proof beyond that. We need to be able to show the court where the movement of people happened. Documents. Payments. Witnesses. Rona looks at April then, and in that look is not just fear but a trembling of protective ferocity. Then we have to find proof, she says. We have to give it to you. Carter's expression is humane, wary. If you have anything, you bring it to us. And if anyone is in immediate danger, you tell us now. Marlon opens his mouth to say something brave. He will tear Ray's operations down with his own hands if it comes to it. But the memory of his frail chest, the nights he spent counting pennies and anxiously composing plans, stops him. He thinks of the risks to the family, of the violence that Ray can command, of Celia's networks like a spider's web across the valley. He is not a man used to fighting with fists anymore. He is a man who has made mistakes and wants to fix them. I don't want you or April to get hurt, he says to Carter. We'll help any way we can. But we need protection. Carter nods, slow and sure. We can arrange witness protection for anyone who gives us evidence, he says. We can make sure your statements are handled securely. We can. I don't know if I can go to the police, April whispers. She cannot name the reasons. She cannot face the idea that she killed Callum, though deep in her bones she suspects otherwise. She does not want to see Ray's face if it's shown on paper. She does not want to put words where violence lived. She only knows that the police's presence is a thin promise of safety, and that promise feels both like a hand offered and a blade. Rona takes April's hand. Whatever you decide, we're with you, she says. We'll do it together. They do a thing then that is small and radical. They return to the farm, not to the rooms where fear is threaded into the curtains, but to the places where evidence might hide. A shed with a false floor, a tractor with receipts tucked in the seat, an old ledger Celia kept in a locked drawer because she loved the way numbers obeyed her. Rona and Marlon look like two people digging with the strength of all their shame and courage, and April watches them work with the feeling that the world might tilt and set right. They find a ticket stub from a logistics firm, an unsigned payment confirmation in the ledger, a name scrawled in a margin that matches a line in Dylan's statement. Each piece of paper is a small victory that tastes like hope. They take photographs, copies, and make a list to hand to Carter. They bring names and dates, and the kind of quiet evidence you can put in the hands of the law, and ask the law to behave like a net. Back at the farmhouse, Ray watches the valley from his kitchen window. The hills are slate, and the sky peels like an old bruise. He knows they are coming. He knows the police are methodical. He knows the city has resources he has only ever thought of as distances. He imagines himself moving like smoke, impossible to grasp, yet he can feel the fat net of a ledger remembering his debt. Celia moves through the rooms with a mistress's disregard for safety. She is already writing counter-narratives, the sort of stories that bend juries and men. When Carter returns, it is not for arrest. It is for information. He brings with him a list that makes Ray's name look like an item on a grocery bill. There are photographs, bank transfers, the kind of pedantic evidence that the courts like to sleep on until the world is ready to wake them. You can run, Carter says, not unkindly. You can threaten. You can. If you hurt Dylan again, you'll be making things much worse for yourself. Ray hears dystopian music in his head, horns blaring for a man who finally sees the edge. He could try to run. He could try to hide. He could try to make the violence a thing that never had an audience, like a sin washed into the rain. But the farm is his gravity. The networks are his breathing. He thinks of Beowulf's eyes, hollow and old. He thinks of April's hands, the way she had held a glass and not been untouchable. He thinks of the ledger, and of the small thrill of being the man who kept people in line. There is a moment where he chooses to stall not because he is repentant, but because he is calculating. If Dylan said something, he says slowly, then maybe we should talk. Carter's lips crease like someone who is tired of being surprised. We will be talking. For a while, a week, maybe a lifetime. The village holds its breath. There are whispers in the pub, and Mary returns from her holiday to a life that smells different than the one she left. Rona insulates Mary with small lies about holidays and health while Marlon watches the skies for police cars. The farm is emptier. Men who had been shadows in the yard are gone. And if one or two of them manage to escape across the border of the valley, the county's reach is long. Evidence gathered by Rona and Marlon tips the balance. The ledger finds its way to Carter's desk. Payments traced to shell companies. Photos of men in fields. Dylan's statement, folded and full of the ache of someone who had seen too much. The police move with a slow confidence. There is no need for cinema's rush when the law works by patience and paper. Arrest warrants are drafted. Search orders signed. The village watches like an audience pressed to the glass. Ray and Celia, always the architects of coercion, find themselves reduced to clients of fate. Ray packs nothing. He is not a man who needs to take the world with him. He is a man who fears forgetting where he hid the keys. Celia tries to call every favored contact, to make deals, to sew up old favors. There are no guarantees left. There are only long. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Emmerdale Echoes.